On the 11th of November 2020, this memorial here in Shanklin is 100 years old. The magnificent structure is just one of a number of memorials and plaques which can be found throughout Shanklin, dedicated to those from the Great War and World War II. In this film we will be looking at where they can be found, but first we start in London. After the end of the Great War, the then Prime Minister David Lloyd George planned to hold a victory parade on the 19th of July 1919, called the Peace Celebration. Soldiers would march down Whitehall following temporary structures erected along the parade's route, one of which was placed where today we know the cenotaph. After the success of the parade, a permanent structure was commissioned, and work started using Portland stone from Dorset. It was at 11 a.m. on November the 11th, 1920, that then King George V unveiled the cenotaph. At the same time, on the Isle of Wight, guest of honour, Mrs. White Popham, unveiled Shanklin's Great War Memorial, led by Reverend Robert Kerwin from St. Blasius Church. Like the London cenotaph, Shanklin's memorial was built using Portland stone. It was designed by Ernest Charles Cooper, whose designs were used by Thomas and Joseph Ellery to create the memorial for a small sum of just £100. The memorial has a square footprint of 12 feet 10 inches and stands just over 17 feet tall. The chamber has 4 panels displaying the names of 105 servicemen from 1914 to 1918. Following the end of World War II, the dedication panel was amended to record the dates of both wars. In November 1951, the 2 Victorian-style wrought-iron gates were installed at the top step of the courtyard in memory of the Hawtry brothers. The right-hand gate, reading SH, was dedicated to Stephen Hawtry, who died in March 1951, and the left gate dedicated to his younger brother Roger, who fought in the Battle of Singapore, which was one of the worst defeats that the British suffered in World War II. On the 13th of February 1942, Roger Hawtry, a lieutenant with the MRNVR, was involved with the evacuation of women and children on board the HMS Guillaume B. Japanese fighter planes attacked the ships waiting to leave harbour. In the course of the attack, Captain Lancaster of the Guillaume B was ordered by the Japanese to abandon ship. With 300 civilians on board, 100 entered 2 of the lifeboats, and it was only after they were in the water did it become apparent that the lifeboats had been damaged in the air attack. 2 other lifeboats successfully launched, with 1 boat making it to safety. The other was picked up by the Japanese and the occupants taken to internment camps. Those remaining on board went down as the ship was destroyed in the harbour. In the end, most of the crew, including Roger Hawtry and at least 200 civilians, perished. 2 days later, Lieutenant General Arthur Percival surrendered Singapore. In 1995, after a lengthy campaign by Derek Kent, a purpose-built separate memorial was erected dedicated to those from World War II, designed by Barry Hall and cut from Portland stone by White Stone Masonry Limited. The memorial names 40 servicemen and 14 fire service personnel who died, and it was unveiled on the 11th of November 1995. In 2014, restoration was started on the Great War Memorial by White Stone Masonry Limited, and the surrounding gardens were now under the direction of the Greentown Shanklin volunteers. In August 2018, a pair of the Great War Centenary commemorative benches were installed in the memorial courtyard. And with the 100th anniversary in 2020, both memorials were professionally cleaned. The Great War Memorial received Grade 2 listed status from Historic England.
For the Fallen by Lawrence Bignon. With proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children, England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirits of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free.
We start the rest of our journey around the memorials and plaques at Shanklin's oldest church, the picturesque St. Blasius. There has been a church here dating back to Norman times, probably originally a chapel for the manor. Named John the Baptist, the oldest part of the present building dates back to the 14th century. Restoration on the church started in 1852 and it became the parish church from 1853. The lich gates were erected in 1894 as a memorial to the last resident of Shanklin Manor, Lord Francis White Popham. Inside you will find many memorials to families like the White Pophams and the Hills. The church continued to be known as St. John the Baptist till the 19th century. When it became St. Blasius is open to speculation. In 1939, registrars started calling the church by its new name, St. Blasius. Blaise was the young bishop of Sebast in Armenia. He was connected with the healing of diseases of the throat. He was also the patron saint of weavers, woolcombers, builders and carpenters. Shanklin is one of only 5 towns in England to have this name. Associated very strongly with St. Blasius is Shanklin Church of England Primary School, now St. Blasius Academy. The school was founded in 1872 as the result of a Christian desire to provide for the children of the town, and it welcomes children of all faiths and of none.
Solemn the drums thrill, death august and royal, sing sorrow up into immortal spheres. There is music in the midst of desolation, and a glory that shines upon our tears.
St. Saviour on the Cliff stands alongside the cliff-top path near the southern end of Shanklin and was built to cope with the rapid growth of the town. In the 1860s, the church was designed by Thomas Hellier. Hellier was an English architect based on the Isle of Wight and was the leading island-based architect of the period. The foundation stone was laid on Ascension Day in 1867, and the first phase of the building, the nave, chancel vestry and organ chamber, were consecrated by Bishop Ryan, formerly the first Bishop of Mauritius, on the 7th of May 1869. The south aisle and porch were added in 1871, with the north aisle and church hall 5 years later. To complete the church, the tower and spire were added in 1887. St. Saviour's has 8 bells which are hung for full circle ringing. They were cast by the Whitechapel foundry Mears and Steinbank in 1888. They were recently restored in 2002 with new fittings but in the original oak bell frame. There is also a small Sanctus bell cast in 1868 by tailors of Loughborough, which was the original bell for the church before the tower was built. This bell now hangs in the room below the 8 bells and is rung during the parish mass on Sundays. The narthex, now known as the Galilee Porch, and the baptistry appeared in 1905. Both inside and out, you will find various plaques dedicated to those from the Great War. And in 1946, the Lady Chapel was created as a thanksgiving for the preservation of the church during World War II.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe.
In 1871, a temporary church in the form of an iron building was erected in Station Road, now Regent Street. The church was originally dedicated to St Helen and was opened on the 21st of May 1871. The building provided seating for 200 souls and consisted of a nave, chancel and south porch. It was a year later, in 1872, that discussions took place to replace the iron church, and Mr. C. L. Luck of Carlton Chambers was appointed to prepare plans for the new church. Work behind the iron church began in 1874, and the foundation stone was laid on St. Paul's Day, the 25th of January 1875, by the Vicar of Sandown, Reverend Carney. The consecration of the church was due to take place on the 26th of July 1876, but sadly the vicar designated for this, Reverend Grain, died just 6 weeks before. The consecration still went ahead, led by the Lord Bishop of Winchester, the Right Reverend E. H. Brown. Over the years, the church has known many disasters. In 1878, HMS Eudacy capsized off Dunnose Point. The bell was brought ashore and was housed in the tower as a single bell, which still continues to hang there today. Unfortunately, due to the condition of the tower, the bell can no longer be rung. With the outbreak of war, the church was yet again exposed to disaster. In early 1943, a German bomb struck St. Paul's when it passed horizontally through the church and exploded in the vicarage next door. The vicar, Reverend Arnes, his wife and mother were killed, and the vicarage destroyed. After this, the church was closed for 4 years until it reopened in 1947. In the porch is a memorial by architect Mr. W. A. Pite, dedicated to those who died in the Great War. The wooden lectern in the form of an eagle is a memorial for the late Reverend Arnes and the members of the forces and civilians of the parish who lost their lives in the Second World War.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Sacred Heart is Shanklin's only Roman Catholic church. The first church on the site, a tin church, was opened in 1888. This was replaced by a permanent Flemish Gothic brick church by Benedict Williamson in 1906. The church stands north of the town centre, close to the railway station and amongst Victorian suburban streets. On the 3rd of January 1943, Father Clark and his congregation were celebrating benediction when the church was directly hit by a Focke-Wulf 190, returning to Germany after bombing Portsmouth. Sadly, 6 people were killed and the church was almost totally destroyed. One of the first visitors to the hospital that night was the vicar of St. Paul's, Reverend Arnes, who at once offered the use of his church hall for Sunday masses. As we learnt earlier, the Reverend Downes was killed in the next bombing raid to hit Shanklin. A temporary church was used until the present building was erected in 1956 to designs by R. Gilbert of Gilbert and Hobson Ventnor. Sacred Heart has only one generally viewed aspect, that to the north. It is set back behind a steep forecourt and is of distinctive 1950s design, with a mighty tower broader than deep. The high-level nave windows to either side are angled à la Coventry Cathedral, with concrete frames. It has a pantile roof with deeply overhanging eaves. And the pointed arch and brickwork above the entrance internally are a retention of the surviving part of the tower of the previous church.
They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables of home. They have no lot in our labour of the daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam.
Shanklin Methodist Church was established in 1864 and is situated in the centre of the main shopping street in Shanklin town centre. It has a very traditional look, but recently the old Victorian screen that obscured the interior of the church from the outside has been removed and replaced by double glass doors. This allows easier access and a view of the beautiful stained glass window that was installed over the altar in 1964 to mark the 100th anniversary.
But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known, as the stars are known to the night.
In 1879, this became the third church to be built on this site. Mr. J. Sulman was appointed as the chief architect for this new project. So on the 29th of May 1882, the Lord of the Manor, F. White Popham, Esquire, laid the foundation stone of the church hall. On October the 26th, he laid the foundation stone for the new church building, and Mrs. Scaramanga laid the foundation stone for the clock tower. The new church reopened in August 1883. With the onset of the Second World War, the church continued to function admirably. Enemy air raids were frequent on the island, and church members were asked to play their part as volunteer fire watchers. The church did not escape enemy air raids either. Its clock tower was severely damaged by a blast from several bombs that fell nearby in 1945. The tower was inspected within the first 10 minutes of one devastating explosion, but the extent of the damage did not become apparent until 1946, when large cracks began to appear in its fabric. Plans for a new porch and tower were immediately submitted and approved. By June 1952, a contract to begin the work had been signed. The foundation stone for the porch and tower was laid in 1953, and apart from a short delay because of the shortage of steel, the reconstruction went ahead and was completed in 1954. When the new clock tower was finished, the town council accepted responsibility for the upkeep of its clock, which had become a useful landmark for residents and visitors alike. In 2014, the town clock fell silent. After 4 years, the clock was refurbished. The work started in April 2018 and was completed by the end of July, and included tower stonework repairs and a new roof. As with all churches we have featured, you can find various memorial plaques, both inside and out.
As the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end they remain.
The first memorial to 40 Commando Royal Marines who trained in the Shanklin Chine for the Dieppe raid was unveiled on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, and it was on the top path in the Chine with an enormous amount of people there, and a great success, and Medina Marching Band. Sadly, in one of the great, wasn't the hurricane, but it was another very big storm about a year or two after the hurricane. The memorial was completely damaged, and we had to think again about where it should go. So it went into its present site, which was done by Jock Farmer, and the plaque, which was in bronze we got from Portsmouth, was put on the present one. And then we added over the years the benches and the memorials.
Shanklin, like many other towns and villages around the United Kingdom, has had its fair share of tragedy during the two world wars, as well as other conflicts, whether it's those lost or injured while serving their country, or those who are just going about their normal daily lives. We should never forget them, and we never will.